Hello, everyone, and welcome. Just get settled. Um, we are going to start the webinar very soon. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you joining us for this Sollum Technologies and Agriculture webinar all about leafy greens. So I just want to allow a few more people to join, get comfortable, and obviously if you have questions that you are burning, then you're welcome to think about those and prepare those for later in the webinar. We will have time for some questions, certainly. Okay, so welcome. As I said, we are here for a webinar on future-proof your leafy greens, the power of dynamic LED lighting. And if you're not familiar with dynamic LED lighting, you're going to learn all about it today in quite a bit of detail with our special guest, Abhay Tosar from Sollum Technologies, who leads a lot of the horticulture work and is a PhD, but he'll do his introduction in a moment. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Henry Gordon Smith, and I'm the founder and CEO of Agritecture. You know, Abhay, when we started this, said, "Where do you live? Where are you based?" And I'm a nomad, so I travel the world. I'm actually in my 6th year of not having a home. And as you can see, I travel all kinds of greenhouses. I see all kinds of greenhouses and vertical farms all around the world. I'm super passionate about really learning about this sector and sharing it to inspire other people, what's working where, what's not working. And so it's always a pleasure to work with Sollum to talk about their technology and share it with you. So, you know, as an educational platform at Agritecture with our webinars and our blog, it really is a privilege to have you here that we can share some of this information with you. So first off, I wanted to just begin to get to know you better a little bit. So if maybe we could just answer this poll here so we get to know who you are. So you should be able to see it. It's which best describes you and who are you, so we can know who's on the call here and maybe focus a little bit of our attention to you. You're also welcome to use the chat if you have something you want to share. But again, when we get to the question period, I highly recommend you use the Q&A tool so we can track those questions and answer them effectively. Okay, looks like we've got about 67 participate, 74. Very good, nice. Thank you so much for that. And I'm gonna wrap it up there. So it looks like we have a lot of researchers here, which is great. Some academics maybe. We've got vertical farm operators and some greenhouse operators as well. Great. Thank you so much for that. Now, I would like to also understand where you are in the world. Okay, this is going to help us to understand a little bit more about you. Let me just get this right here. So if you could tell us which part of the world you're from. I'm currently in New York City on the Lower East Side. Despite being a nomad, I'm here today. It's pretty gray weather. But okay, we got a big presence from North America, some from Asia. Wow, thank you for joining with that time zone. South America as well. Okay, so there we go. You can see where you're all from here. And that's great to have you on this webinar. Thank you so much for joining from all around the world. That's the best part of this, is that there's just so much interest from around the world. And these, you know, this whole industry is developing around the world. Well, without further ado, I would really like to have Abhay introduce himself. Abhay, can you tell us a bit about who you are and a bit of your background?
Absolutely. So who I am, I'm a plant physiologist to begin with. So that's my core. That's where my mind goes. I'm a plant physiologist. But having said that, I never like to put myself in a sandbox, if I may say that, to do the research and just publish the papers. So that's where my mind always goes towards how can the science be useful for the grower, either to save $1 or make one extra dollar. I'm just saying dollar because I'm in North America. It could be euro, it could be whatever different currency. But That's the whole thing that I always like to focus on. So that being said, I was a grower in order to understand what the growers undergo. Almost for 12 years, I've been a grower.
Wow.
Yeah, and then for the last 12 years, I have been in the horticulture LED applications, a lot, even with the fixed spectrum LEDs. And then that's when Sollum was actually evolving in the last 10 years. And now I'm with Sollum as their chief horticulture specialist role, um, whereby I work very closely with the growers. So that's where my heart goes towards is once a grower, always a grower. So I like to
I
work
mean,
with the growers.
I think that's really interesting and exciting, right? That you have this grower background plus the academic plant physiology background. I mean, that's a rare combination. And balancing those things really, I guess, applied science, right? Making it really work for the growers, as you said, for efficiency and savings is really, really interesting. So um, let's get into it. You've got a bit of a presentation for us about dynamic lighting and leafy greens. And we're gonna, welcome our audience to ask questions. I've got some polls along the way about dynamic lighting as well and leafy greens. So without further ado, you can pull up your presentation and we can get into it.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Let me know. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, it's in the speaker view, so you just want to try the other view. It's always a bit awkward, right? When you're trying to
Yeah, I know.
presentation up, but I think we're all used to that. We've all been there. So
Okay, this should be the right one now.
there we go. Nice jump.
Awesome. Awesome. Sorry for that. It's technology. Sometimes it's good and bad, but hey. All right, so let's dive into future-proofing your leafy greens with the dynamic LED lighting. Just without any further ado, why dynamic lighting? Like that's the question I usually get from the growers that, hey, why dynamic lighting now all of a sudden? And I'm like, it's not all of a sudden. If we go back and look at what the growers used to do, this is when I say when even I was a grower, I didn't have a choice but to work with HPS because that was the best technology available in terms of supplemental lighting for the greenhouse. And that's what the growers have been using for, as far as I know, based on my age, for the last 25 to 30 years. So it has also been beyond that. So that was the best fixture that the growers had as a supplemental lighting in the greenhouse. But as the technology evolves, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, that's when we had the LED technology evolve, and we got commercially viable solution in terms of LEDs. The trials or the research was being done with LEDs even in the 60s and the 70s. However, it was not a commercially viable solution. But after 2010, 2012, we got all these different companies who were producing commercially viable LED solutions. And and fair enough, it was more of a fixed spectrum where they were focusing more on the red and blues because from the physiology standpoint, those are the wavelengths that the plants would utilize to optimize the photosynthetic activity, basic plant physiology. So nothing fancy, but important thing, the move from or the step from HPS to LEDs. So that was really important for the mindset of the growers to change from, okay, why should I go towards LEDs when I'm growing my crops comfortably with HPS? So it was more a comparison that was happening. Can I grow the crops in the same fashion? Can I get the same results with a fixed spectrum LEDs? Sure enough, they were able to not only get the same results, but better results. We take one more step forward. So Sollum has been working with dynamic LEDs for the last 10 years. And I know that I know Sollum from last 10 years because I was in the industry. But at that time, again, it wasn't a commercially viable solution. But they did take the step in that direction. And fast forward now in 2023, 2024, and then 2025, as we go forward, the dynamic LEDs are getting a lot more commercially viable, becoming a commercially viable solution in terms of their efficacy, pricing, application in the greenhouses. It is becoming a much better solution for the growers. So today, with the evolving technology, Sollum now offers fully dynamic spectrum with individual control of blue, green, red, and far red channels with a very user-friendly software. That's important because it can also integrate with the grower's existing climate control computer. So Sollum has been on the forefront of the dynamic lighting technology for the last 10 years, perfecting it, improving it, making it commercially viable solution. So when we talk about that, a question that arises in the minds of the growers, okay, well, why do I need this blue or UV or red and far red, and what impact does it play on my plant physiology? I know a lot of the people, they already know about it. I just wanted to touch this real quick. um, that as we know that UV, it stimulates the production of antioxidants, increasingly used against pathogens. We know that this technology has now been applied in a lot of greenhouses, whereby they are giving the UV treatment to the crops. So that's something that has evolved over the years. The blue wavelength, it produces compact roots. We know that with the thicker leaves and stems, stimulates the production of antioxidants. We know how it is applied in the leafy green context for anthocyanin pigmentation in lettuce in the last 2 or 3 days, and we'll come back to that in later slides. And I think the last point is the same, is useful for coloration of red leaf crops. Yellow and green, although people say that, well, that wavelength, it's not optimizing the photosynthesis. To a point, yes, but at the same time it does play an important role in the overall photosynthesis of the crop canopy. So it penetrates deeper in the canopy, and to a certain extent it also has the shade avoidance response. So I like to call it as the pseudo far red, if I may say that. Red, as we know, is the driver of photosynthesis and biomass accumulation, which is pretty much, as I said, the basic plant physiology. And the red to far red ratio is where it's very important to control the stem elongation and flowering. Far red, there's a lot of discussion that has been going on with the far red for the last 2 3 years now. What can be done with the far red? But yes, it does enhance the photosynthesis with the red light. We know that. It's a pure science. Stem elongation through the shade avoidance. So we know that the far red will help in stem elongation, and also it has an impact on the flowering response. So whether it is, whichever crop, and mostly in the ornamentals like the long day plants, it will help there. But also in a lot of different scenarios, which again, going forward, we will cover that. But at this point, I think, Henry, it's time for you to take a poll again. So let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually, yeah, I have a question for you after this poll, but let's get into it and see what our audience knows about light and and how it affects it, right? So the question here is, at which stage does far red light, um, have significant value? Where does it make the most sense? Where does it have the most value? Is it propagation, the growth phase, or the finishing phase? You may have hinted at it a little bit, right? Okay, we got some divided folks here. About 58% participation. Let's just continue a little bit, see what we got. Okay. So most of the audience believes the growth phase is where the far red light has significant value, has the most value, so to say. Abhay, what's the truth? What's your scientific assessment?
All right. No, we have a really, I would say we have a really intelligent audience today because I know, and the reason I say that it depends on the crop. So I know each of our audience, they are not, everyone is not a leafy green grower. So they are, each one is thinking in their own perspective. So that's where all these different answers are coming from. And all of them are correct, I would say, if I may say that. So moving forward to our next slide, then I can say where
I
is,
had one question a bit
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you've been in this for so long, right? And I've also been in the sector for a little while, and you know, when it comes to LED lights, there's been a lot of shifting of what they say we need, right? Different companies say we need or not. Can you share with us some of the things that we used to believe, right? Science obviously is evolving, but like, what are some of the key things around LED lights that we used to believe that, are no longer really accurate or have changed? It could be about spectra, it could be about, growth phases, et cetera. I mean, you talked about the LED lights actually starting to be competitive with HPS, which is obviously an exciting turning point. But is there anything else like that that would be interesting to share?
Absolutely. So with the HPS, I would say that's a story of the past. Now it is more fixed LEDs versus dynamic LEDs,
Mm.
if I may say that. And what we have been, as I said earlier, we were focusing more on the red and the blues. And and there was a reason for that. It was not just because someone wanted to do it. It was a reason that we wanted to have the most efficacious fixture, a much more commercially affordable fixture at that point. So we were focusing on the red and the blues. However, we all know that light is the driving force, right? So when you have a driving force for the plant, it's important to have adjust all the other environmental parameters in order to support that, or it can certain times it can negatively impact the crop.
Mm.
And that's exactly to answer your question, Henry, is yes, we've started with the red and the blues, but when we started seeing that in the dead of the winter, when the temperatures are cold, we don't have natural enough of the natural sunlight, I would say, and less than 5 moles per day when the plants are depending more on the supplemental light. That's where the plants, and if I was the plant, I would be saying, well, I don't just need red and blue, guys. I need a few of the other wavelengths in order to function completely or properly. And that's where the growers were seeing the negative impact of just the narrow spectrum with just the red and the blues. And that's where we saw the transition happening now, or the research also being done that, okay, do we need green? Do we need far red at a certain time? And this is all dependent on all the other factors. It's not just light, as I said. So that's where even the far red comes into play to answer, from the pole, even from the growth phases. So if I may take, if start from propagation, if it was a cannabis propagation, we know that far red also would help in the oxygen synthesis, and that's where you can put in the far red in the initial phase, and it can actually help to have a faster rooting in the growth phase, as a lot of the our audience they polled in the for the growth phase. It's certainly if you're growing tomato or cucumbers, peppers in a greenhouse, or even for leafy greens. As a matter of fact, because just recently I was with a customer where they had really we saw the cold snap happening, and what was happening was with the lettuce it was all really tight, and when that happens, you do need that far red if you have the flexibility. If you don't have the flexibility in your fixture, where are you going to get the far red from? So if you have the flexibility to turn the far red on to its max, you can use it. You can loosen the lettuce crop, and in the end, because one thing that the growers also need to understand is it's not instantaneous. What happens today or with the cold snap, you're going to see the impact 2 weeks down the road, where you start seeing that the crop is not performing well, or it is getting a leaf or tip burn more. And when you dial back and you see, well, when did it start? It started 2 weeks back when there was a cold snap. So if I had the ability to manage the light with the environment, or with the limitations that I have with the environment, I would have been able to avoid it. So to come back to our presentation, in propagation, strong root growth, and spectrum for compact seedlings. So when you have a dynamic lighting, as I said earlier, with a higher blue content, you could really keep your seedlings compact. And this plays a very important role when it comes to our leafy greens um, and lettuce, because you don't want to have a spindly uh, transplant. In the growth phase, you can maximize the photosynthesis. And recently, there has been a paper by Wageningen University where you can, go to a higher red content during the growth phase, and with that shift, you can really optimize the production. So optimizing light, which also gives you the faster growth and higher energy use efficiency. So as you move towards a higher red content, you do get a higher energy use efficiency. But that's because you are able to do it along with the other growth factors, not just with the light. So if you just have 95% red or 100% red, and you keep pushing it all the time without adjusting the other growth factors, or you don't have complementing growth factors, it's going to have a negative impact on the. And what all of that would realize when you start pushing the crop is shorter cycles. So for the leafy greens, we know that they already have the cycle time, depending on if you're doing teen leaf, baby leaf, it's like anywhere between 23, 25 days cycle, up to if you have a whole head after the transplant, it is like 28 to 34-day cycle. If you are able to reduce, 2, 3, or 4 days for a whole head lettuce, or 2 days for your baby leaf, guess what? You can push in 2 to 3 extra cycles through the year. And that's exactly where you get a faster ROI on your dynamic LED lighting. And this is something that the growers need to think about, because they run on a very thin margin in leafy greens. In finishing, I think I already touched that before about the anthocyanin boost for the red leaf lettuce, but also important for our European colleagues, where right now they also have to make sure that the nitrate content in the finished product should be less than a certain ppm levels, and they can actually achieve that by playing with the light levels, or with a certain lighting strategy. And you can contact me later and we can discuss in more in depth what that strategy would look like. So moving forward, when we talk about higher yields, we talked about that. Optimizing the spectrum boost photosynthesis, I touched on it. That's the reference from the Wageningen University trial. But also there are, the grower trials that we conduct with our fixture. And there are really interesting results that we could share, whereby the growers are seeing, instead of a fixed spectrum compared to a dynamic spectrum, they're seeing anywhere between 10 to 30% increase in their production, because they are able to have the right spectrum that complements the growing conditions of the greenhouse. And this is very important, because I don't want our viewers to think that, oh, just putting in dynamic LED lighting, I'm going to get more production. No, it is more to complement your existing growing conditions. Some might have limitations in their infrastructure, in the use of energy, in the way they would heat their greenhouses. To all of that, it's important how you manage your spectrum to overcome those limitations. Uh, and to that, when we move to the next one, where important is the quality. So reducing tip and leaf burn. Just last week I was at a CEA event at Ohio State University, and I had a chance to discuss it with Laura from Delphi. And again, yeah, how can we reduce the leaf and tip burn? Um, that can be efficiently done, and with a dynamic lighting spectrum where you have a certain wavelength, a certain intensity at a certain growth stage of the crop, and you can definitely avoid having those leaf or tip burns. Night interruption, it supports the pathogen control. Again, there is a research paper on that, that you could control the uh, the downy mildew in basil, and that's particularly for that research paper, whereby you have a certain light intensity that you run throughout 24 hours with a certain wavelength, and you are able to have uh, the downy mildew was really low when you had that treatment. Energy savings. This is very important. when it comes to not so much for people who are using their generating their own power and have and they pay less cents per kilowatt hour, but when they're having a much higher pricing for energy, the dynamic dimming, what Sollum offers is also through their patented software called SunAs, which aligns with the plant growth. So what that means is depending on the natural light, it will automatically dim the light levels. You can put in the values in there in terms of PPFD, in terms of moles that you want to target. And depending on that, the software will control the dimming as well as the spectrum of the fixture to align with the plant growth. So when you have a consistent lighting, consistent throughout the growth period, that also helps in avoiding any of the leaf or tip burn issues in the crops. And Henry, I think it's time for you for the second poll again. Sorry, I keep coming back to you.
No problem. We're a team here, and that was all very interesting. I want to talk more about the economics in a moment, but let's get into it. So this poll is really about adaptability, right? How important is adaptability for you? I certainly know that in my experience, a lot of the smaller growers or even big growers, they need to adapt, right? So whether it's changing consumer preferences, supply chain issues, climate issues, even in, we're not talking about today, but in something like cannabis, where there's sort of been saturation of product and you have to differentiate your product. I'm curious, how important is adaptability to our audience? Okay. Okay, a little bit more. It's fun. I get to see them all coming in. Okay, so definitely important and very important is something mentioned, which, I think that's really the sign that, the era of these static LEDs is sort of past, right? You're not going to be able to adapt if you've got an LED fixture that you can't change anything with or adapt to different crops. I certainly know when we're working on projects as well, we try to design the grow system so they're adaptable, so they can change plant spacing and things like that. And I think that relates to so many parts of the business overall. Okay, you should be able to see those now.
Yep, you can see them.
Okay, fantastic. Let's continue.
All right. So as we move forward, why adaptability? So this is more to future-proof your greenhouse operations with LED lighting. One thing I would say, like, as I've learned when I came to North America, like the big investment is in the house. The second big investment is your car. For greenhouses, lighting is a big investment. And you knowing the nature of LEDs, you invest in LEDs, you know that it's going to last you for the next 10, 15 years. So when you're going to do that, we want to make sure that you get the full adaptability and flexibility that you can get, that you put that fixture in there, regardless of the crop. Now you have the flexibility to control your spectrum, your intensity to cater to the needs of the crop. So maybe I'm a greenhouse grower growing leafy greens right now, but like even with the climatic conditions, like I'm in Ontario, right? I'm based in Ontario, so I have a winter here. Like just 2 weeks back, it was really cold. I didn't have much of the natural light, so if I was in the greenhouse, guess what? My whole scenario would be different than someone in Texas who has 10 moles of natural light inside the greenhouse and they're trying to grow the same leafy greens that I am. Now they would be focusing on a much different spectrum than I would in terms to make sure that my crop it is not stressed. So that's the flexibility that the growers can get when it comes to now. It's funny when I say Texas because even they got to see the snow and how the nature behaves. And in that scenario, even though they are in Texas, if it was a dynamic lighting, they would definitely benefit from it by making changes to those wavelengths that can support the growth of the crop and at least avoid growing the crop in stress conditions. Important thing is flex to any crop type. Yeah, today we are talking about leafy greens, baby greens, but yeah, when it comes to baby leaf or teen leaf, absolutely, you can push the crop really, as fast as you want in terms of the PPFD as well as the spectrum, and you won't see a whole lot of leaf burn or tip burn injuries. But when it comes to a full head lettuce, which I'm pretty sure depending on the changing market scenario, the growers would want to add the full head lettuce. Guess what? You will have to change your strategy of lighting for a full head lettuce. You cannot push it the same way with a fixed LED spectrum, but you will have to change it. Otherwise, you're going to run into big time issues with the leaf burn and tip burn. So those are the kind of flexibilities. Now, even another extreme, if you move from leafy greens or full head lettuce, if you move to a completely different crop, say eggplant, okay, now I'm not importing any eggplant, say from X country. I want to grow it myself here. Guess what? I need to adapt it, adapt the lighting so that it is much more favoring towards growing towards the eggplant. And that's my next point is respond to the changing market demand, right? So that's exactly where you can do it. And one system for all crops. I think I packed a whole lot of things rather than going through point by point. I was covering a whole lot of things. So it is a misconception of many owners or growers that the the fully dynamic LEDs are very expensive. Even without talking to them, it's like, oh, it's a 4 channel, it will be expensive. It's almost like saying if I go to buy a car and I'm like, okay, I want a car with all the bells and whistles. Yeah, it's not going to cost me 25 or 30% more. We know that. We know that it's just a add-on that you get, and it is still comparable. And now I get all the benefits of that same thing. The dynamic LEDs, yes, they were expensive 10 years back. With the dynamic, if I had a 4 channel fixture, it, it was really expensive, but now it's not true. And that's why I do encourage people to reach out to the lighting companies, talk to them rather than just assuming things. So with the development of technologies, it is a lot more comparable with the fixed spectrum LEDs. Just last week, I was sitting with a customer. Same thing. They were like, "Oh yeah, all of this is good, but they must be really expensive. Do you have a quote?" And luckily, I had my salesperson sitting right beside me. He pulled up the quote and he's looking at it and it's like, okay, that really surprises me in a pleasant way. That's not really expensive. And I'm like, yeah. So now you get the adaptability, you get the flexibility at a really good pricing. So having said that, it's not about just selling the lighting fixtures because a lot of the people, and when I say people, it's the growers, they think that, yeah, you come in, you do the spiel, you sell me the lighting, and you walk away. What am I supposed to do after that? So that's where Sollum steps in, and it's not. And when I say that, I know it would be controversial, and a lot of people in my company are not going to like it. When I say that, we don't just sell lights, we sell the complete solution. And what I mean by that is, as you can see on the slide here, that yeah, the lighting fixture is just one component of that solution. The important component is our turnkey software, which we call as SunAs. That's our patented software that we use. And you can really incorporate that with your current climate computer. And what that does is that's where all the magic happens, or all the science happens, I should say. You could go in and control your DLI, your PPFD, the spectrum that you want with the growth stage of the crop. You can also zone it. Like it's important. When you have a big greenhouse in a leafy greens, we know that we have so many cultivars. And then if I have in one zone just the red leaf lettuce, and then in the second zone, I have whole head, and then in the third zone, I have a baby leaf green, I want to make sure that I provide them with the correct lighting recipe, with the correct DLI for them to make the best benefit of that lighting. So what I could do with the sun as is I could zone them in three different, even with the same fixtures. So the fixtures are the same throughout the greenhouse. I'm going to zone them differently in three different zones, and each one of them is going to cater to the needs of the crop based on my climate, based on my environment. So that way, even with the same fixture, I can have three different light recipes, three different DLIs, going in there and working closely with the plants to excel their performance. So that's one thing. And then the last thing is the smart support. As you can see, it's more holding the hand. So one thing I like to tell the growers is we are not your consultant. So don't talk to us like your consultants. I don't want to be your consultant. If you have a consultant, great, I'll work with them, but also I will work with your growers. And the reason for that is it's more sharing the knowledge. So whatever knowledge that we have gained in the last 10 to 12 years, working on different crops, it's more sharing that knowledge, which is important. And a lot of people, they think that if I'm going to share this recipe, I'm going to lose the customer. I don't think so, because the more you share, it's more that the growers can talk to you. They get more confidence in what they're getting into, and that's exactly where Sollum comes in. They hold the hand of the grower and ensure their success till they feel confident. So it is not just selling the lights, giving you the software, but it's also sharing the knowledge that we have, and we also take a step further, and we would be willing to train the grower and their team on how to work with the dynamic LED lighting. So that's like a complete package that we offer. And if I'm having a complete package with a slightly higher price than a fixed spectrum, but now the grower is getting the flexibility, the adaptability, and future proofing their greenhouse. Well, if I was the grower now, that's the way I would think, regardless whether it is Sollum, whoever, and again, I don't want to say the names, but it is more now's the time to take the step towards dynamic LED light. So I think that pretty much sums it up, Henry, from my end. Uh, I'm sure you would have a lot of questions for me, but yeah.
Yeah, very nice. And you can definitely see Sollum Technologies at Indoor Icon. I'll be there as well. It's booth 1125, and you can see the lights in action, speak to their team. Abhay, thank you so much. I mean, this was a really concise, to the point presentation that was very balanced between the business case and the science, which I think obviously comes from your background as a grower as well. So thank you for explaining to us the benefits of dynamic lighting and how it applies to leafy green so far. We have some questions in from the audience, so let's start to get into those. You can use the Q&A feature, or I'm also looking at the chat team, if that's okay, if you prefer that. So Finley Shapiro is asking, is the primary effect of far infrared simply to warm up the leaves? And if so, is it the best way to warm up the leaves?
Okay, so first of all, far red and infrared, those are different. So far red is when you're between 700 to 750 nanometers, and infrared is beyond 800 nanometers. So infrared is where you heat, yes, that is where the crop gets the heat, and that's what you have in the HPS. Whereas far red is more, it's not heating the crop, but it's more, as I explained earlier, more on the morphological responses by the crop. So does that answer the question? Yeah.
I think so. We'll see what Finley says. This question, I'm not sure I understand it, but Peter Chalkley is asking, would you add a sunlight set of bulbs to make it stronger as well as to enhance the setup of the lights? I think it's about like adding
The
additional.
spectrum, like going towards the sunlight spectrum,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly. And that's like if you see or if you visit our website, and that's exactly where our trademark, our patented solution, it's the sun as, it itself says that you could have. So we do have fixtures with the 7 channels, and what that means is you could recreate almost a spectrum that's similar to the sunlight. So if that's the question, yes, with our dynamic lighting, if you are interested in creating a spectrum that's close enough to the sunlight, you are able to do that.
Okay. What would be the budget range that I need to consider for an 8 by 8 foot grow area? That sounds like a very small grow area.
Ah, 8 by 8 foot, you said?
Would that be one light or?
Yeah, I would, depending on what crop you're growing, because if you're propagating, you're looking at 100 micromoles. But if you are growing cannabis, you're looking at 1,000 micromoles. So
Right.
it's it's hard to say that, oh, you just need one light. But no, for cannabis
Okay.
you might need more if you're targeting 1,000 or 1,500 micromoles. So
Yeah.
yeah, if well, I would ask the audience, please reach out to me, email me with more details, and I can definitely get back to you with much more accurate answer.
Yeah. Elshan, if you want to add more light to your requests, that would be helpful. Okay, let's get into some of these here. Um, Anonymous attendee says, I assume that with dynamic lighting, you refer to the spectrum changes as dimmable LEDs are already the standard nowadays. If I'm a grower looking at the investment dynamic spectrum LEDs, can you tell me if they're more expensive than classic LEDs? If so, what is the real benefit? Can you give me real numbers? For example, percent better yield. We did talk about 30% better yield in some cases earlier. Abhay did say that. XX more days of shelf life. Please give an example, because if they cost 50% more and the yields are only 1% higher, it's hard to say that's worth it. So I think they're looking for some, other data on this. Can you give us any, even anonymous case studies that can give us some range of that? I mean, it must vary so much, but that'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll begin from the last sentence that they, first of all, they don't cost 50% more. So let me say that straight off the bat. Like if you're comparing a fixed spectrum LED and a dynamic spectrum or a dynamic LED with the 4 channels, it doesn't cost 50% more. So that's definitely not accurate. And again, if you want to know more about our pricing and everything, please reach out to us and we can discuss more at length. So the pricing is out of the way. Now it comes to the plant performance. As I mentioned earlier, it is more so we do have, and I would just say a customer that is based in Ohio, Huron, is growing the leafy greens. So I'll split it into two. So one example with the leafy green and one with the high wire, if that's okay. So with the leafy greens, what they're seeing is when they're switching to a specific, spectrum, and again, during the winter months, this plays a very important role when you can switch that, but also during the shoulder months when you have enough of natural light. So when the grower is asking the question, it is not improvement by just by 1% in yield. We are seeing anywhere between 10 to 30% increase in the yield because of the dynamic spectrum that we have, and that's exactly where it comes down to. So you're you're not paying more for to get a fully dynamic LED spectrum, but now you're getting the flexibility to adapt to your growing conditions to excel or get the best plant performance. Make sense?
Okay. Yes. Someone's asking about how difficult it is to install. These lights are quite fancy. I guess it depends where we're installing them, but
That's you don't want to install them. That's too tedious. I'm just kidding. Things have, yeah, it's as any other lighting fixture. You have a very easy click, like you have replacing retrofitting LEDs. You do have the same, like the green connectors or the black connectors that you might have. You can have the same with our fixtures. just remove those, click, and you're done. Like it's that easy to connect. So yeah, if it comes to any wiring, and most of the greenhouses, because they had, say, for example, if they had 1,000-watt LEDs right now, they are over engineered, I would say, in terms of wiring, because they had pulled a lot of copper to run those 1,000-watt LEDs.
Mhm.
And if you're going to replace 1,000-watt with 800-watt LED, guess what? You do have a lot of copper running in the greenhouse already, and you can still get the same, micromoles of PPFD.
So we got a couple questions here again about buying the lights, um, and some of that. So I'm just going to sort of get into those really quickly. I mean, who is selling the dynamic lighting LEDs? Well, Sollum Technology is selling them.
Yeah,
So, you're
yeah.
welcome to contact Sollum to discuss your specific project and get a quote, which is going to be the best way that you understand the cost, and they will walk you through the potential benefits to your operation. I'm sure they're going to ask a lot of questions about your operation to make sure it fits it appropriately. And so Jim also asked a similar question. What is the budget number I can use for green leaf, produce, lettuce, lights? I operate an indoor vertical farm and I'm considering new lights. Jim, you can definitely reach out to Sollum Technologies through their website. And you'll be able to get on a call with them to talk about those prices for your operation. I mean, every operation is different. So, it's not about avoiding giving a price. It's just that there's a customized reality based on the crop, the scale, etc. Um, Elliot, what ranges of intensity for each color do you see most often offered or asked for dynamic lighting? What are most of the growers looking for? I suppose any intensity is possible based on the dynamic lighting, but what are the growers asking for most commonly in your experience of hay?
Yeah, so it would be depending on the crop. Absolutely. So, as I said earlier, so let's say in context of leafy greens, if we talk about leafy greens, teen leaf, baby leaf, you can target anywhere from 17, 18 moles to 25 moles, 27 moles per day. And when I say that in terms of supplemental lighting, you can go up to 300 micromoles even for baby leaf, teen leaf, and you could still grow them really well without having the leaf burn or tip burn issues. In terms of whole head lettuce, you have to be a little bit careful because you cannot just push the crop really fast because you can run into issues of leaf and tip burn. And that's where you need to manage the spectrum and the intensity. So it would be a little bit on the lower side, say 150 to 200 micromoles would be where I would be safe in for the whole head lettuce. Now, when it comes to say vine crops, whether it is a tomato, cucumbers, peppers, we have the research that you can push it to 350, 400 micromoles easily, and you can really see the impact on the crop. Now, one thing, and also not to avoid cannabis, you can go up to 1,500, 1,800 micromoles in cannabis, which is a different beast, and we are not talking about that right now. But one thing I would definitely add is don't think about the light only. Yes, light is a driving force, and it is important that when you work or push the plant with the lights, it's the basic equation, right? We have learned in our when we were in the high school. CO2 plus H2O in presence of light gives us, sucrose, or it forms the sugars. That's basically the equation. So if you're pushing with more light, make sure that you adjust your CO2. Your H2O, when I say H2O in a broad sense, but it is more how you irrigate it, your fertilizer. And also more important is your VPD conditions. And that's where comes in your temperature, what you're maintaining. If you're pushing in for more light, make sure you have the correct temperature, the correct humidity. And when all of this works in synchronization, just like a band, that's when you get a good symphony. I don't know if that was a good analogy, but
Yeah, I think it
that's how
makes
it is.
sense, right? There's not one factor that's going to control everything, and you've
Yeah,
emphasized that you have to balance those various variables together. Same thing with us as human beings, right? We've got all kinds of different variables
absolutely.
to have us be healthy and successful, and sometimes you can go out of balance. But that adaptability is what lets you sort of at least have some control to rebalance it, right? Will dynamic LEDs reduce the BER in tomato and bell pepper in conjunction with correct fertilizer and supplemental lights?
Sorry, they reduced the what? I didn't get the acronym.
BER, I don't actually know what that is.
Yeah, me neither. Like,
Okay, Jim, if you want to give some clarification on that one, you're welcome to ask again. Blossom and rot.
yeah, that's again with regards to the calcium deficiency. So yeah, so sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Will dynamic LEDs help reduce blossom and rot in tomato and bell peppers in conjunction with the correct fertilizer and, supplemental light? I guess the light is the dynamic LED.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We do have applications in both, in tomatoes as well as in peppers. In fact, we do have a white paper that we had recently published on bell peppers for dynamic lighting. So you can feel free to look for that paper as well. So we do have really good results with the dynamic lighting preventing the blossom and rot. So yeah, the answer is yes. If you want to know more, I cannot disclose the whole light recipe, so that wouldn't be fair. Yeah, it would be more on client to client basis that we work, and we would work with them to have that particular light recipe.
Okay. Well, I think we really got into this topic quite a bit, Abe, and I appreciate your presentation and your Q&A. Thank you, everyone who joined with these questions. I definitely invite you to check out the Sollum Technologies website. They've got tons of case studies, academic papers, examples that you can look at to consider for your operation. I myself have had the pleasure of visiting multiple operations that use Sollum Technologies lights, and I've heard from their customers just how satisfied they are with that flexibility and that control. And of course, if you're at Indoor AgCon next week, please come say hi to me and Abe or the Sollum
Yeah,
team there. We'd love
I
to.
will be there too in person. So yeah, if you have more questions, feel free. I would be glad to sit down with you and answer your questions. And if I don't have the answers, which I don't have all the time, I will find the right person that can answer your question as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you joining this webinar today, and have a great day. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions in the follow-up. We will do our best if you want to contact us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.